Guess who's back?
Welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to get into our video. The next division we're going to hit up is the NFC North. But before we get into that, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, leave a comment after with your thoughts on the video. So the NFC North, we're going to start off with the Lions. They were the worst team in the division. They ended the season with a 3-12-1 record. That one tie coming in week 1, I believe, against the Arizona Cardinals in that shootout. And the Lions, they're like the NFC Patriots. They currently roster 15 former Patriots on the team. Of course, Matt Patricia, the head coach, this is his 3rd year as head coach of the Lions from that Belichick coaching tree. So he's trying to create his own little New England team in Detroit. Starting off in this offseason, they signed in free agency linebacker Jamie Collins. He has an interesting career. He started off really good, Super Bowl champ with the Pats, and they let him walk. He went to Cleveland. Was unimpressive, really, I would say. And then because of that, New England gets him back on the cheap, and he plays great for them again. And now he's getting to cash in for the 2nd time in free agency, going to the Lions, but again linking up with Matt Patricia. So that kind of hybrid defense that New England plays, that's what the Lions are looking for. And they added quite a few players, both in free agency and the draft, including cornerback Desmond Trufant. Of course, Darius Slay was traded shortly after this to the Eagles. I think Slay, he wanted out for a while once they knew the team wasn't going to want to extend him and give him the money that he thought he deserved, and he is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. Trufant, he's a veteran. These last few years, he's had some injuries, so they were able to get him on a pretty good deal. I believe it was 2 years, $20 million, $10 million per season. He's not going to fully fill in the void of Slay, but he's an effective veteran. They also signed Danny Shelton, another former Patriot, to fill in on the defensive line. Snacks Harrison is no longer with the team, and neither is A'Shawn Robinson. That was their duo of defensive tackles. So, I mean, it's pretty much a clean slate, you could almost say, on the defensive side. Patricia's really trying to get his guys in there. On the offensive side, free agent that they also signed, Halapuli Vaitai, or Big V is what they call him, or the Eagles. He started a few games on their Super Bowl run. Whenever he has played since then, it's mostly been in a backup capacity and hasn't really. We're more familiar with Eagles fans. I mean, Eagles fans, they did not really like this guy, so I'm sure they're glad he's out of Philadelphia. But they signed him to a rather large contract, 5 years, $50 million, 10 per season. So. But it's pretty front-loaded, so if it doesn't work out, they could get rid of him pretty quickly. So those were the free agency moves that they had. Moving into the draft, they had the number 3 overall pick. They had one of the worst, teams in the league, basically. And I think RJ, the pick that they had was in the first round was something that was telegraphed pretty much from day one.
Yeah, with them losing, trading away Slay and getting Trufant, but you still got to have in today's NFL, I feel like coverage is the most important thing, and they took arguably the most sound cornerback that we've seen in the past 5 years come out of Ohio State, and that was Okudah. And I feel like he's just like has all pro written all over him from the get-go.
So yeah, Okudah, definitely at that point, that guy was circled on the list. Going back till the first day, once this college football season ended for the Lions, and once you started hearing the rumblings about Slay, because there were trade talks between the Eagles and the Lions and in the middle of the season for Slay. So it'd been going back pretty far. In the second round, kind of a value pick that they got was DeAndre Swift. And like we've said many times in these other videos, those top 4 running backs, you could argue who was the best, but Swift immediately goes into the Lions' backfield and can immediately compete because the current starter, Kerryon Johnson, he was injured last year, and when he was on the field, it wasn't that impressive either. So
you can make an argument that that's the most valuable running back that they've had throughout Matthew Stafford's career already.
Yeah, you could say it's the most talent, because I would argue that DeAndre Swift and other drafts would definitely be a first-round talent. It's just the way of the NFL where the value of the position has gone down, but he definitely has that first-round talent. And they hadn't taken anybody that early at the running back position. I believe Javid Best was the last guy, and his career was cut short by injury and just didn't really pan out. In the third round, they got Julian Okwara, another guy. This guy, he was coming off, I believe, a broken arm. But before that, I mean, every year he would improve on his sack totals. I really like this guy. If he's back healthy, which that was all indications going into the draft, he's going to be very valuable on their defensive line. They have Trey Flowers on one end. He's more of that left defensive end, good run stopper, another former Patriot. Okwara can be that right defensive end and rush the passer. Overall, I mean, they had a decent draft. Their first 3 picks were great. I mean, of course, everything else on the back end is a toss-up on whether they're going to make the team or not.
Yeah.
Some of the bigger stories, like I mentioned, Kerryon Johnson coming back from injury. Kenny Golladay, he's going into his 4th year. He had a great 2019. This is a contract year for Kenny G. So expect big things from him. Matthew Stafford, last year, coming back from a back injury. This is going to be his 2nd year in Darrell Bevell's offense. I'll let you go into Stafford because my thoughts on him, I'll get into them after you.
Yeah, but from what I've seen, it's kind of a mixed from the fan base on Stafford going into this latter part of his career. And for me, it kind of is also. But I've seen definitely the highs that he's been able to give this franchise, and I do feel like he really hasn't had much talent to work with throughout his career. Besides Calvin, but really that was all they had. And I don't know. How do you feel about him?
He's got a strong arm. I'll say that. I mean, he's got one of the strongest arms probably we've seen in the last 10 years, which, that's just I always like that, But the thing with him is every time something's going good, like even last season, he was top 5 in a bunch of categories before the injury. Something just goes haywire. I mean, maybe it's bad luck, but I don't know. He hasn't really been able to put it all together, and I think that his time is running pretty short in Detroit, like you said. So this might be... Look, Patricia, it's his 3rd year as the head coach of the Lions. How much longer is that leash? And at a certain point, you're going to have to kind of... the quarterback is that next thing other than the head coach that you make a change at. This year they were picking in the number 3 slot. They had an opportunity to take a quarterback. They decided not to. So, I mean, that tells me that they're invested in Stafford for at least this one more year. He's still got a massive cap hit right now. That's one reason whether if they were to cut him or trade him, I think he would still cost that $20+ million in dead money on their books. So they kind of got to ride with him for now. But I mean, this might be the last year for him in Detroit if things don't go good. But like I said, 2nd year in Darrell Bevell's offense, who was the former offensive coordinator of the Seahawks whenever they won a Super Bowl. He had an unceremonious end with his time in Seattle. I mean, I think everybody remembered that the fans hated their offense, and they were happy when he walked out the door. So, but they have also some youth on the offense. Like I said, Kenny Golladay, Marvin Jones has his, he has his 4 games every year where he just blows up. Last year, they drafted T.J. Hawkinson in the 1st round. They have a pretty good backfield, and they have invested in the offensive line, which they're going to have to reinvest in for the next quarterback, or whether it's Stafford still there, because Taylor Decker, the left tackle who they took a few years back from Ohio State, his contract's coming up. But I mean, really, a lot is on the line for this team, and I think that's a common theme for pretty much every team in this division.
And honestly, they were in a lot of close games, and honestly, they should have beat the Packers last year when they went to go play them in Lambeau. We all know that game was very controversial as far as the calls at the end, but yeah, it's not like they weren't competitive, especially with Stafford. And yeah, he was having one of his best career starts to his careers of the season, one of the best seasons of his career last year until he got injured, and he was really playing well. So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year when he's able to bounce back and see what they can do with in Patricia's 3rd year, and especially with now DeAndre Swift in the backfield, having somebody there that's more than, like I said, probably his best running back that he's had throughout his career.
So that'll finish up for the Lions. Going into the next team, the Bears. I mean, the Bears, their story is it's very negative, but I mean they still only finished 8-8. It was mediocre. I think some people had them as a potential Super Bowl team this year, but man, it starts at the quarterback, Mitch Trubisky. He has some issues. He can't throw to his left, and one of the first things they did, or not one of the first things, but one of the biggest things they did was trade for Nick Foles. Rather than sign a guy like Cam Newton, we'll get a little more into that, but I know, RJ, you had something to say about the trade with Foles and what that dynamic is going to be between him and Trubisky going into training camp.
Oh, I feel like you're going to have to end up picking, like, how do you say it? The worst, like, the least worst. Basically, I feel like with when Foles really won that Super Bowl, was it Frank? Who's the quarterback coach over there with the Eagles at the time, and now he's with the Colts?
Oh, Frank Reich.
Yeah, Frank Reich really played a big role in that, and really just ever since then I don't think Foles really has to have that like he was with Andy Reid, and then obviously you saw with Frank Reich when he went back with the Eagles. Supreme innovator. Yeah, supreme innovator and stuff like that, and being able to just really not make things easier on him, but really to be able to know what gets the most out of this in particular quarterback. And I feel like really the Bears didn't do as much as they didn't maximize the quarterback position as much as they could have with what was out there, and didn't do it in a way with trading for Foles in a way that benefited the team long run, especially with trading away draft picks or whatever. And stuff, and the cap hit now with
that's a big thing is that they took on the big contract that the Jags gave him, which is I believe $22 million, and then on top of that, a big part of Mitch's side is that they declined his 5th-year option, and I mean you don't see that very often. I mean, even Marcus Mariota and Jameis Winston, who had not too stellar starts to their career, they got their 5th-year options picked up. So I mean the Bears say, and even Matt Nagy say, we're in on Mitch, but your decisions on the quarterback don't really say that, and to be honest with you, I wouldn't be in on him either. I mean, they didn't want to admit the mistake whenever they did it, but I mean, it's obvious now, going on 4 years later, about to be 4 years later, that he shouldn't have been the first quarterback taken, and they rolled the dice on the guy, and it's going to come back and bite them because on the other side of the ball, I mean, they have a hell of a squad. Yeah,
this has probably been one of the most frustrating teams as just straight bias being level across the field is so one of the teams to watch and look at just because they've been right there. I mean, the Eagles game in the playoffs, they had one of the going into that playoff run, they had one of the best defenses in the NFL, and you really saw they had all the pieces and everything like that. So it was kind of been hard, I'm pretty sure, for Bears fans just to be like everything's basically there, but at the end of the day, quarterback's most important.
I mean, you could list off. I mean, they have a great Akeem Hicks, Eddie Jackson, the safety, at corner Kyle Fuller. I mean, and then the big piece of them all, Khalil Mack, who they kind of leveraged their entire future on once they thought Mitch was going to be the guy, but he was definitely worth it. It's just that the quarterback part didn't work out for them. They doubled down on that defense. They signed Robert Quinn, who had a great season for the Cowboys. We could speak to that. Pure pass rusher, had 11.5 sacks. I mean, that's going to be a great duo. I mean, he's going from pairing up with D-Law to now pairing up with Khalil Mack. I expect him to have another good season. And then they also signed Jimmy Graham to play tight end. At one point, I believe they had 7 or 8 tight ends on the roster after the draft. Jimmy Graham, I mean, he went to Seattle, wasn't much fireworks, went to the Packers even less. He just hasn't been the same since the Saints. I wish he never left the Saints. I mean, that was, whenever they were going off, it was close to unstoppable. I mean, they never reached the ultimate goal, but man, that was one of the best offenses that I've ever seen personally.
Yeah, probably through the series of runs, you could, AB, Gronk, Dez, and Graham were all just monstrous.
Touchdown machines.
Yeah. I think with the Bears, I think we really need to talk about Nagy, because there was definitely times last season where you saw the frustration from fans and just people, fantasy owners in general. I mean, not that probably really don't care about that as fans if you're a diehard fan, but still it played a role in the frustration that Nagy, his really indecisiveness and
recognizing the talent.
And I feel like he's a pretty good innovator, and he did good things for Mitch at times, but sometimes I feel like it was too much for knowing when too much is just too much, especially on certain third downs and distances and all that stuff, and having a guy like Montgomery back there that did play well at times. I feel like this is a huge. I feel like he could probably get fired after this season too.
Yeah, I mean,
if things don't go well, he needs to make sure he finds he rolls with the guy whoever he picks, and it's like, hey, this is how it's gonna be, and
he needs to find his scapegoat. Basically, is what it's gonna be, and And the reason I say it's odd is because they declined Mitch Trubisky's fifth-year option, but then, like I said, Nagy doubled down on this is our guy. We believe in Mitch. And then last year, there were times, like you were saying, play calling was frustrating because as the team and as the head coach, everyone's looking at you, and you should be able to understand that this guy doesn't have it, but you're having him attempt 40-plus passes in games. Some of them close games where they have an opportunity to win, where if you turn to the run game maybe or some different aspect of the offense, they might have been able to pull out one more or two more victories, and that might have been enough to make the playoffs. So, I mean, a lot is riding for this team. Getting into their draft quickly, they didn't have a first-round pick, of course, from the Khalil Mack trade, but in the second round, they take arguably the best tight end in the class, doubling up on the position in free agency. Now they draft Cole Kmet from Notre Dame. In the second round, I think this was their best value that they had. Jalen Johnson, cornerback from Utah. He had a little bit of an injury issue, which pushed him down. A bunch of cornerbacks got pushed down because the next pick was Trevon Diggs to the Cowboys, who, I mean, both of these guys were, in talks possibly late first-round picks. So that was a good addition. Travis Gibson, I mean, from the second round, after the second round, they didn't have a pick until the fifth round. So, I mean, this goes into all the trades and things that they're doing. Travis Gibson was a good pick for them, though, edge from Tulsa. But after that, like I said, once you get to the back half of the draft, there's no guarantees anybody's going to make the team. So, like I said, once they took Mitch and they thought that was going to be their future, they leveraged everything. They made a big trade. So now, I mean,
as big as this upcoming season is for the quarterback, it is just as big for the head coach.
Yep. Very similar to the Lions. So I think that about hits it for the Bears. Next up, the Vikings. I'm rocking with one of my GOATs, Adrian Peterson, today. But unfortunately, he does not play for that team anymore. But they do have the great Dalvin Cook, who torched our Cowboys and completely shredded them last year. But I think the big story about the Vikings, I mean, they had big stories on both sides of the ball, but this is a defensive head coach in Mike Zimmer. Another guy that I feel maybe he is on the hot seat. There were talks about him last season. Even though the team makes the playoffs, they always find a way to sputter out whenever it really counts. But on the defensive side, they're losing some stars from the past. I mean, Everson Griffin's gone, Linval Joseph, Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes, all these guys were starters. And they were starters whenever this was one of the best defenses in the league. Last year, they were one of the worst. All those guys are gone. So going into this offseason, it was all about rebuilding a defense. And I'm sure Mike Zimmer had a big say in that. They got rid of their defensive coordinator, George Edwards, who's now with the Dallas Cowboys. So he's going to have a lot of say on what goes on defense. I don't know exactly what their situation is on who's going to call the plays, but I wouldn't be surprised if Zimmer's going to be the guy doing that. But so far, even with all the moves, Zimmer says that he is excited to start working with some young guys. It's refreshing, he says. But starting off, I mean, starting with the free agency, the big thing that they did, of course, was the trading of Stephon Diggs to the Bills for a first-round pick and I believe a fifth-round pick. Diggs, another guy, much like Darius Lyons, who constant chatter that, he wasn't satisfied in his role with the Vikings, and finally they got a deal done and shipped him off. They also extended Kirk Cousins, so I think when one domino fell, the other was going to fall, because that was a relationship that really never solidified. And being a fan of Stephon Diggs personally, it was just always so up and down. He would have his great games, then he would have a slight injury, and anytime in his career when Diggs had any kind of injury, he wouldn't show up in the game. And then once Adam Thielen kind of developed into the player he moved into the slot and Diggs went to the outside, where Diggs, his rookie year, when he played the slot, he had a great rookie season. Once Diggs went to the outside, you immediately saw that Thielen was going to be the main go-to, the number one target over Diggs. And it just kind of affected that relationship, and it affected his production, I think. So they got those two things done. They also, with the leaving of Linval Joseph, they signed defensive tackle Michael Pierce from the Ravens. Pure run stuffer, one of the best in the league to do it. So a two-down tackle, not going to give you much in the pass rush, but definitely a good run stopper. And they also signed wide receiver Tajay Sharp. which with the departure of Stephon Diggs, I think going into the draft with the losses at cornerback and Rhodes and Waynes, and then the loss of Diggs, because after those two guys, Thielen and Diggs, their receiver wasn't very deep. Going into the draft, it was really wide receiver and corner. And
I want to make a point that I feel like except for Griffin, obviously you kind of had to trade Diggs. Maybe it was kind of like ready to move on from those guys that did end up leaving. And as we come into the draft, they did an amazing job in the draft and really found new fresh talent to work with. And as we run through these picks, I expect like all their top first 4 picks to probably all end up starting.
Yeah, and I mean, going into the draft, it was a big draft for them, and I think they hit it out of the park. They had one of the best. They probably had the second best draft out of any team other than the Ravens. Starting off at pick 22, Justin Jefferson fell into their lap, the receiver from LSU. Of course, we talked about this in our previous video with the winners and losers. The Vikings were one of our winners, but Justin Jefferson immediately can slide in. He can play slot for you. He can play on the outside. Love that pick. Jeff Gladney falls to them, and whenever they trade back with their next first-round pick, the cornerback from TCU, another immediate starter to play across from Mike Hughes, their other first-round pick, formerly from UCF. And then a big one, I believe, in the second round, because this offensive line had trouble protecting Kirk. You have to protect Kirk. He's not the most mobile guy. And they get tackle Ezra Cleveland from Boise State, and there were rumors of him being a first-round pick. So I like that value in the second round. And then the next pick, Cameron Dancer, corner from Mississippi State, physical corner, immediately slides into possibly being that third corner for them. So every position that was kind of depleted. They also took 2 defensive ends in this draft. Defensive tackle James Lynch from Baylor, who was an underrated sleeper in this whole process. I mean, every position that they had a need at, they kind of filled it, and they got supreme value at the same time. So I really love what they did. And I feel like they're going to be right in there to compete again. Is it going to get them to the promised land? I don't know if I could say that, but they'll be in the playoffs, I believe. Yeah. They're still a really good team, and I like Zimmer as a head coach. It's just sometimes he's another one of those guys that is stuck to his ways sometimes. You see that, and it gets them into trouble in tight games.
I did feel like they reset, they reloaded, and they're ready to go ahead and make a run again. It's not really nice when your team need just sets up with the amount of value that you get right there in your draft where you're drafting, and it just comes together nicely. And I think that's what happened with the Vikings, and they really got the most out of the draft.
So the last and final team, the Green Bay Packers, the hated Green Bay Packers. Last year they had a pretty good season, but there were times where it was just like, is this team good or is this team not good? Their final record was good, but it was just, I don't know, it was kind of like illusions. I don't know what was going on. Aaron Rodgers didn't look like the Aaron Rodgers that we see normally. They were relying on the run game, which at times was completely dominant, like against the Cowboys where they destroyed us. And then at times our defense looked dominant, and then at times it looked like trash. Which in the final game of their season against the 49ers, they could not stop the run. They got completely destroyed in that game. The final score was 37-20. They never really were in that game. That was the NFC Championship. They made it all the way into the NFC Championship, which I'll give them credit. Matt LaFleur, his first year as head coach, I mean, that's impressive. To go into a team that had a lot of internal issues whenever Mike McCarthy left, or at least rumors of, and then, the story is he going to be able to get along with Aaron Rodgers, or it's more vice versa? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to get along with this young head coach? And they did enough to make it, to have a chance to get to the Super Bowl.
I feel like their season was a little bit of an illusion. Like, it was, like you said, they were. I think their record was better than what they actually did. I don't think they were as good as their record was.
Yeah.
And that's not. I mean, I'm not really. I mean, I'm not the biggest Aaron Rodgers fan or anything like that. But like I said, we don't keep it biased here.
Yeah.
I really feel like that. There's a bunch of data that came out as far as Rodgers. He did have one of the worst parts of his career last year at times, and really just wasn't playing good. Arguably, though, Devontae Adams did go out for how many games was he out? I think he was out the whole month of October. I want to say
it was at least 4 weeks.
Yeah, And the defense started off good, and then they ended up just really, I think their pass defense ended up really letting them down. And to me, them making it to the NFC Championship game, in my opinion, last year there was only one good team in the NFC. One team, and I emphasize that team, and that was the Niners. Everybody else, I really didn't feel. Everybody else had their very glaring problems, and I felt like with Green Bay heading into the NFC Championship game, there really wasn't anything that told me that it was going to be different than the matchup that they had on Sunday Night Football against the 49ers in that earlier in that season. There wasn't anything that told me that was going to be different, and it ended up not being different.
I can't remember what the score of that one was, but it was even worse. It was like 45-10 or something like that. But, like RJ said, whenever Devontae Adams went down, there wasn't much that stepped up. Of course, they took later round receivers in previous drafts. Marcus Valdez-Scantling, Geronimo Allison, Equinemi St. Brown. None of those guys really showed anything. I believe they brought in Alan Lazard off the practice squad. He was the one guy that kind of popped off and kind of got a connection with Rodgers. So after the season, going into it, everyone's like, okay, they got to take a wide receiver. That's what they're looking for in the first round, right? Whenever they pick, or they got to go defense because, they were 14th against pass on defense, 23rd against the run, 18th in total. So, pretty average whenever it comes out to it. And then overall, going into this season, they played a lot of close games and they won a lot of close games. Generally, whenever that happens, there's going to be regression to the mean. So this year, they may not have that, pristine record, the same pristine record as they had last year. I believe they finished 13-3.
There's one or two plays in an NFL game that are absolutely defining. Like it's difference between going 7-9 or really 13-3. Honestly.
Yep. So then, of course, like we said, going into the draft, those were the needs that we thought, that everybody thought. What do? They trade up in the first round to the 26th pick, and they take Jordan Love, the quarterback from Utah State, which everyone was like, what?
Which I made it a point to say you can't say that's a bad pick yet.
No.
And it is for the future, so in a way it is very responsible.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's a bad thing because anytime you take a quarterback, if you believe it's the quarterback, whether it ends up being Mitch Trubisky or Patrick Mahomes, whoever it is, you're always taking a gamble. Yeah. And Aaron Rodgers is already, 34 years old, I believe, 35. So he's getting up there. He's had injuries. Last year, he looked human, he had that 2 or 3 year stretch where I said it was the greatest quarterback that I've ever seen physically. His talent,
the greatest quarterback to ever touch Earth. And then Patrick Mahomes came along.
Yeah, and then Patrick Mahomes, he flipped the script. Mm-hmm. Let's see if he can do it for a long time. But so Jordan Love, they take him in the first round. I don't know. If they believe this is the guy of the future, good pick. But he's got some decision-making issues with the ball whenever he's passing that he needs to fix.
And we know the rest of the draft played out. They picked the running back out of
Boston College, the big bruiser in the second, tight end in the third, who they're going to supposedly use as a fullback, possibly DeGuara from Cincinnati. Everything was just odd. Yeah. They said that this offense is going to rely on the run game. That's what Matt LaFleur said post-draft. So
that's not playing. It's not playing to your strength. What was I going to say? We talked about them having close games, and then I feel like really their record was actually better than what the team was. I don't think the team was actually as good as the record. They did not do anything to really set themselves up to where, like you were saying, they had close games throughout the season. They did not do anything to assure that, hey, this time if we're going to be in those close games again, we have some pieces there that are going to be able to help us win those games and stuff. And I feel like you're going to see a regression.
Yeah. So. Going into the 2020 season, how do we see it playing out? I'll start off. I still believe that the Packers and the Vikings are going to be playoff teams, but I feel like the Vikings will win this division.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's their time. The Packers, there's going to be regression. That was Matt LaFleur's first year. There's going to be growing pains eventually. This is his second. And like in those close games, you know, sometimes things change, but they still have a lot of talent. And at the end of the day, they still have Aaron Rodgers. I still believe he's still got some of that juice that he had in previous years. Until I see a precipitous decline, then I'm not going to believe it. Kind of like Tom Brady. People were saying, how many years have people said that Tom Brady was washed and that was it for him, and then they won 2 Super Bowls, and then it's like, I'm going to give Aaron Rodgers that benefit of the doubt.
At the end of the day, his ability is still there.
Yeah.
His ability to do what we've seen him do before, and that's kill teams and just really just made other teams pull their hair out. It's still there, and he still has. I feel like you saw at times it's the supreme ability to just make the plays and those throws that just are wow you. What was the throw last year where they said that was probably one of the greatest throws I've seen? It was against the Chiefs.
It was a touchdown.
It was against the Chiefs. Yeah, that was a really.
To Geronimo Allison.
Yeah, that was
where he was getting pulled down from the back and he.
Yeah, that was a stupid play.
So, and then the other 2 teams, the Lions. I mean, if Matthew Stafford is healthy, I could see this team making the playoffs somehow. Because I mean, I think of all the teams, this head coach has the most to lose. Of all of them. Because there's not really much that you can blame it on. I mean, he's got to bring in all the players that he wants, third year, and the quarterback's there. So if Stafford is healthy, the expectation is the playoffs. The Bears, for me, I believe by week 4, there's going to be a new quarterback, and it's just going to be a back and forth thing. I don't believe in Mitch Trubisky. I don't believe in Nick Foles. And I believe at the end of the season, they're going to have a new quarterback going into 21, and they're going to have a new head coach going into 21. There's too much talent on this team to continue going down the same path. This is the make it or break it for them. So, I see 2 definite playoff locks, and then 1 maybe, and then 1 definitely not. So you could write that down. If I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it right now.
Yeah, I see it as like the teams that. The Lions got players in the draft and free agency to make an immediate impact. The Vikings, obviously they did win the division last year, so they no, they didn't. My bad. I'm sorry.
The Packers
won the division, but they were right there.
Yeah.
I feel like they can win the division this year because they did get players. Arguably, the top 4 players are going to make immediate impacts right away. If you really look at any of the teams from the draft, besides the Bears, obviously because they didn't have a first-round pick in this division, the Packers did not get anybody that's going to make an immediate impact. And I feel like they needed that considering at times what you did see last season and seeing little bits of, like I said, I felt like the team wasn't as good as their record. So and the Lions did compete last year with Stafford, like I said. I mean, they went up to Green Bay and they should have won that game. I really feel like if the Packers aren't going to make the playoffs, then obviously I think it'll be the Lions. But it's tough when I think the NFC is going to be very competitive this year. Mm-hmm. I feel like the AFC, you really have those just you know who's and in the NFC it's just like kind of like a toss up every year, and
it's a shootout every year.
I see only one team making it, and that's just Vikings.
So another point in favor of the Vikings that we mentioned right before the video started, we were talking about right before the video started, is that, of course, in the last video we said Kevin Stefanski, the offensive coordinator for the Vikings, is now the head coach of the Browns. The man who replaced him is Gary Kubiak, the run guru, the zone run guru. So, I mean, as good as that run game was last year with Dalvin Cook, it could be even better this year. And I did read a story before this that Garrett Bradbury, the second-year offensive lineman, has been getting his teammates. So their entire offensive line has been working together this entire pandemic at Adam Thielen's ranch, and they've been trying to get some things down because they didn't have a really good year last year as a group. Mm-hmm. Hopefully with the run influence that Gary Kubiak brings, and then that the work that they're doing right now, that could elevate them to another level. But if you don't have nothing to add, I mean, this is a very contentious division. Every team kind of has a question at quarterback, almost, you could say. Or at least there's questions about every one of them. And then also at head coach, too. Other than the Packers, because he just got hired. But, I mean, there's going to be massive pressure on him to produce once again. But I think that about does it for the NFC North. We appreciate you watching this video. Please, like we said, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, leave a comment with some thoughts you have on this division. We will be getting into the AFC South in our next video, and then of course following the NFC South. So please stay tuned for more videos. We appreciate you watching, and we will see you next time.
Yo, I ain't here for the money, I ain't here for the fame. Though it might be nice to own a jet plane, I'ma do it all for you. Come along and see it's true, but the road